dimension of migration is the need of the day. Therefore, we have chosen the theme Gender Dimension of Migration for our first technical session. We are honored to have Professor Vibhuti Patel with us to chair the session. I extend a warm welcome to you, ma'am. In St. Anne's, it is a tradition to welcome our guests with a green sapling. As it is a virtual meeting, we welcome our chief guest, Professor Vibhuti Patel, with green greetings. We have planted a bountiful tree for you at Trees for Ecotourism in Zuluk, Sikkim, India. Let me now introduce our chair of the session, Professor Vibhuti Patel. Professor Vibhuti Patel is PhD in Economics, University of Mumbai. She was awarded Visiting Fellowship to the London School of Economics and Political Science from Association of Commonwealth Universities, UK in 1992-93. She has authored and co-authored 12 books, edited and co-edited 9 books, and contributed over 100 papers as chapters in various books edited by others. 34 research monographs, commentaries, and reviews have been published in the national as well as international academic journals. For EPG Pathshala, UGC Delhi, she has been a paper coordinator for Women and Economics, for MA Women Studies course. She has been a writer for 9 modules and was a reviewer for 11 modules. She worked at SNDT Women's University, Mumbai until her superannuation on 30th June 2017. Post that, she worked at Advanced Center for Women's Studies, School of Development Studies, Tata Institute of Social Sciences from 1st July 2017 until her superannuation on 30th June 2020. Ma'am is a member of several reputed editorial boards and is a recipient of many prestigious awards. I now invite Professor Vibhuti Patel to chair the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Very good morning to one and all. First of all, I would like to thank St. Anne's College for Women and National Commission for Women for giving me this opportunity. I would like to greet Dr. Poppy Nath and Dr. Katie Matsui, who set the tone for this international webinar, and Dr. Smita Astana, Dean of this esteemed institution, Dr. Rekha Panda, Dr. Mani Meklai, Dr. Dora, Dr. Rukmini Rao, who all are very much going to lead the conference in the coming time. And the panelists in this particular session, Dr. C. Krubedran, Dr. Daniel Dora, Dr. Anji, Dr. Zaheda, Dr. Anita, Dr. Divya, Dr. Suhasini, and the esteemed participants of this conference. I see Professor Molly Matthews' name also. I would like to greet her. First of all, I would just like to make a short presentation. I'm given 25 minutes. And if I can share, I would like to share the PPT. Yeah. Is it visible? Excuse me?
Yes, ma'am, it is started.
Okay. So as I think the gender dimension of migration issues and challenges during COVID-19 pandemic has been debated in the women's studies circles, and in the United Nations also took initiative. And as Dr. Matsui told us, that how it is the relationship of migration with poverty. And if we see the map of India, the regions which are sending the highest number of migrant women and men, because 25% of the migrant people out of 12 crore, 3 crore are women. And they are the states where 52% of the migrants in our country, they are from Bihar, then 45% from Jharkhand, MP, UP, Assam, Chhattisgarh, Orissa, Meghalaya, and Rajasthan. And then we see that the relationship of migration and inequality in a very erudite fashion was shown by the keynote address today. And UN has also, globally also, if we see the same pattern is there, that people migrate when they have there are inequalities in terms of wages or labor market opportunities, or even in terms of lifestyle, where you get more opportunities, people trying to go there. Under the lockdown, like 4 stages of lockdown and the 5 stages of, we are at the 5th stage of the unlock period. We have seen in last 7 months, we have seen the two kinds of approaches that we find among the policymakers and different countries. One is a take action now. So there are so many countries, and even in state like India, Kerala has adopted the scenario 1 of a take action now. And there were so many countries which also waited for the herd immunity. That means 50 or 60% of the population should get infected, and automatically the herd immunity would come. That was the kind of cynical approach we saw between January to March. And I think in March, at 4 hours of notice, when the lockdown was imposed, we saw tremendous human misery, and the migration crisis was the most important thing, and how different kind of vested interest and the that developed, and also the rent-seeking behavior, both in the public and private sector of the economy, that we are experiencing now also under the license permit Raj, which was extremely abhorred when India adopted new economic policy in 1991. The gender differential impact of migrant, like though the actual toll of the human lives has been more among men, okay, even among the front line workers, 38% of the women have lost their life, while the 62% of men have lost their life. But the social situation under which the health emergency has happened has taken a heavy toll of women. In terms of the workload, in terms of loss of livelihood, the disproportionately women have been affected, in the burden of care work, reproductive health emergencies, which were not attended to, the trafficking, and overall the violence against women, which is declared as a shadow pandemic by the UN Women. When it came to the question of reverse migration of workers, like we need to understand in the migration discourse why women get invisibilized, because even the way migration data are collected and the question is asked, for men it is like a migrated for work, when women it is a migrated for women. So even as this census 2011 table shows that most of the women, they migrated due to marriage, like in the rural to rural migration 88%, 89%, rural to urban migration 75%, rural to urban migration, that urban to rural was 75%, and rural to urban is 63%, and urban to urban is 58%. But one thing we must remember, that even after marriage, women work. Okay, so that aspect is not highlighted. So when we talk about the reasons for migration, just classifying women that migrated due to marriage is quite inadequate. And even in the reverse migration of workers or professionals or students due to COVID-19 induced lockdown, whether it was international migration, when the Indian students came from India, or Indian workers came from the Gulf countries back to India, interstate and intrastate migration that took place and created tremendous hardship. We must understand the macro reality of a continuously declining work participation of women right from 2000. So we are seeing that, and even if we do the global comparison, women have lost out, whether it is due to automation or the new technology or liberalized policy, more and more casualization of women in the workforce. So we are seeing this trend, and that this trend, which were existing inequalities in the labor market, have exacerbated and exponentially increased. So that is a very important thing we need to understand. And the gender experiences of COVID-19 when we talk about, so we need to understand that intersectional inequalities in the labor market are defined by your gender and class and caste and region, location, whether you are in rural or urban area, or whether you are a part of the digital world or you are outside that. So that is digital divide. That also determines what kind of this thing, as the professor who introduced the topic, she said. And another thing that now when so massive male unemployment is there, the new mindset, patriarchal mindset that is emerging, even when government is the employer, for example, MG Narega, so in that, the mindset is that the men have more right to the job. When so many men are unemployed, why should women aspire for a job? There was a time where for Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, only women-headed household and women who were from the poorest of the poor strata of the economy, they were the beneficiary, because MG Narega wages are less than the state minimum wages rate. And that's why, but in the current crisis, women are dissuaded from getting the opportunities. Another thing is that the gender stereotypes, the whole stereotype of woman as a homemaker and man as a breadwinner, that has also been accentuated in this kind of a situation. And the data from rapid assessment surveys also show that in all countries, women are more likely to increase both unpaid domestic work and unpaid care work. And what we see is that they are doing unpaid adult care, child care, and elderly care, and also but while men are doing mainly, they are concentrated in the shopping of the household or playing with the children. Now, this is the data came from the rapid assessment study of the UN women from across the globe. When it comes to unpaid care work and unpaid work in Indian economy, among the poverty group, among those who are getting less than 10,000 salary per month, that means most informal sector, this is the data from 2015. There too, if we see in the rural areas, men allocate 32 minutes per day for unpaid work. And women are giving 291 minutes. In urban areas, men are giving less than half an hour, 29 minutes. Women are giving around more than 6 hours, 312 minutes. So this is the load of unpaid work that you have when it comes to women. But still, when the crisis took place, the health emergency took place, among Fortune 500 companies, only 2 companies, they took cognizance of this thing and announced special leave. One was a Tata Steel and Swiggy, that they said that special leave, fully paid leave for quarantine without any time limit, and all other regular leaves to remain unaffected. So that was a sensitive on the part of these houses. But elsewhere we have seen that women have, nobody has been sensitive to this kind of unpaid care work. When it comes to the micro, small, and medium enterprises, women have only 9% of the enterprises, and they are all only just survival type. They are not even opportunity driven, and lack of resources, which they see financial and social capital they don't have, and they are suffering currently. And in last 7 months, they have lost out, whether they are enterprises run by the self-help groups too, or women's cooperatives or individual women. So here also we see that women have seen the major brunt, and there are hardly any studies or the research done on this aspect. When it comes to the frontline healthcare workers, most of the frontline healthcare workers, they are hardly local. Most of them are the migrant workers. And India has a 9 lakh public health workers. If we count ASHA workers and Anganwadi workers, again, we have 27 lakhs Anganwadi workers, 10 lakhs ASHA workers, and all of them, they don't even have the personal protection equipment. Since there is a major, that we saw that they got unionized, and they also started demanding to be treated as worker, because they are given honorarium. They are not even treated as an employee. In the informal sector also, we have seen massive migration, because after 1991, with the globalization and with the more very rapid urbanization, so many educated women also started migrating from their native place to the greener pasture in the metropolis and the Tier 2 cities and all. So these women also, they are among them, the unemployment, current new unemployment due to COVID is a 10 to 17% in different states. But they also must juggle with housework, childcare, homeschooling, and office work without support of domestic help. But they are relatively economically better off. And there is a massive media coverage also of the middle class educated families. How are they coping with the crisis? But major problem comes, and as Dr. Mitsui also said, which is women in the informal sector. And ILO's data shows that in India, 32% informal sector workers are self-employed. We have organizations, self-employed women's organization. They have come up with the several rapid assessment studies which corroborate what Dr. Mitsui told us. Informal employees in the informal sector, we have 30%. And we have a contributing family workers, like in so many cottage industries, small scale industries, whole family contributes to the economic activity, but only man is considered as a worker. And now these are the women who have lack of dignity of labor, social security, decent and timely wages, nothing is given to them. And as it was told earlier that in gender segregation, if we see 91 million job losses in the month of April and May that took place, and majority of them happen to be from the disadvantaged groups like scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and among them also 25% of women, they lost job. It has the most vulnerable population among them, women-headed households, ekal nari, women who are divorced or deserted or totally single or elderly, or who have a massive, their men are away from them. They suffered the most. People with disability, pregnant women, homeless women, street children, all of them had to pay a very, very heavy price in terms of loss of livelihood, loss of shelter, and loss of all types of a support system and proneness to violence. And we saw that some of the states, they responded immediately. Kerala is now globally, it is considered to be the ideal place, ideal state in terms of a quick response. And Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Jharkhand, and Chhattisgarh, they have also responded this thing. But the mammoth task in which this crisis took place, it took time for them to even respond. The governance structures took 4 to 6 weeks. By then, the damage was done already. In India, if we talk about the migrant women, we have 3 crore migrant women, and who who had to live under urban slums, in the context of urban and rural slums, in the context of demand for the social distance. And when they live in a 10 by 10 small hut, how could they maintain it? They face police brutality. And finally, because of the loss of wages, they could not pay the rent, and they became homeless, and they started going back. And these are the scenario which is described earlier by my earlier speakers. But I think these images show very clearly that though the overall discourse on migration focuses on man as a worker, but we need to highlight the woes of women, migrant workers, who happen to be 1/4 of the workforce. And they also faced, even while at the time of reverse migration also, the hardships of women were much, much higher. There are so many cases of sexual violence that they face. Even in the truck, men are sitting at the corner where they can get some air and breeze, while women are in the middle. Many of them face sexual harassment also. And we saw the incidences of robbery, extortion, theft, sexual violence, child sexual abuse, suicide, road accident, train accident, massive trafficking of women and children, which is now, all the reports are coming out in the unlocked period. And the most ironical thing is that we don't have data. How many people died on the road, how many women delivered babies on the road, how many children died on the road, and how many reached the destination without this data. It becomes very difficult even to come up with the intervention strategy and make a targeted intervention. The only solace and in the most inspiring thing that happened during this crisis was a solidarity, social solidarity. I think our keynote address ended with the social solidarity. So this social solidarity that happened in a massive way by the civil society organizations, NGOs, trade unions, self-help groups, volunteers in the neighborhood, all of them, they started providing food and water, and they organized even the medical camps, because the private medical practitioners were charging bomb even to write 2 lines later for the migrant workers to go back to their village. They would charge between 2,500 to 4,000 rupees. So Doctors Without Borders, Jana Swasthya, People's Health Assembly, Medico Friend Circle, all of them, they provided the support system wherever they were there. And we saw that even the community kitchens and the camps for the migrant workers were started. There too, women migrant workers volunteered to cook, and they were cooking for 600 people, 1,200 people in places like Bhiwandi, the textile hub. They were sending 12,000 food packets. And later on, when the new directives came about the free availability of PDS ration, they started getting free grains also. Earlier, the voluntary effort of the citizens was there, and also the need assessment studies. So many college students, this is the organization called VACHA, all the adolescent girls studying in junior college, they help with the need assessment, that what are the specific needs of individual women, whether they need a medicine or food or special diet for pregnant women or people with diabetes, they need a special diet. So those kind of voluntary interventions from the students community also happened, and a lot of sensitization took place during this process. The most deplorable thing that happened was uh, delivery, the reproductive health needs. Like according to the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, the national average for the estimated number of pregnant women which were registered during this period is only 24%. And also the newborn baby is only 17%. So we don't even have any idea whether these women, where did they deliver baby, whether did they deliver in the homes or in the farm or on the road, and also the children, or whether inoculation. So because the program, ICDS program was freezed, midday meal was freezed, inoculation and uh, 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 the polio vaccine were also freeze. So in these 7 months, lot of this injury has taken place. Even the vaccination program has exposed our children to polio, and also the midday meal has lowered the nutritional standard of the population. And this has happened in several other countries. In India, because we have freedom of press, we get to know about it. We don't even know in other countries what kind of the nature and the intensity of the problem. When it comes to agriculture also, we have seen that in March, when the lockdown was declared, all the Rabi crop was ready. And this time agriculture reported 11% growth, very bumper crop. And currently, but still here also we see women not being recognized as worker. When we talk about the farm labor, farmers, we talk about, we think that it is only male farmer. When it comes to women, we know them as a farmer's wife or farmer's mother or farmer's widow. We don't even see them as an active worker, and though they are contributing. And these three new bills, which are Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Ordinance, Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Service Ordinance, and Essential Commodities Ordinance, none of them would benefit women, because women are poor peasants, marginal farmers, small farmers, and they don't have any agricultural infrastructure, either a smartphone or a vehicle, where they can do the direct sell of the products that they have. And they have already suffered, like their Rabi crop, they could not sell. Same thing about the tribal women who also are migrating. Our first speaker, they gave the example of a Santal women. Okay, so this 11% of the rural population, which is dependent on the non-timber forest product, they go to the forest and they collect various forest produce. They have also suffered, and that's why we are seeing so many of them are being sold. The children are sold, women are sold. There are forced marriages which are taking place, and which they are also going anywhere to get any kind of a job. In this context, when the economists are saying that economy is closed, we must remember that economy is not closed. Everyone is cooking, cleaning, taking care of their loved ones. It is not just valued by the economist, because it is normally unpaid work. So again, the problem, the whole discourse on unpaid care work, that is very, very important. And unless we take into consideration the value of unpaid care work, we will not we will treat women, even in the formal economy, in a very differential way. Women as healthcare seekers, they have suffered a lot, and basically the reproductive health needs of women, neonatal deaths, maternal mortality, maternal morbidity, self-deliveries, and child mortalities have also escalated during the health crisis. Digital divide, when only 28% of Indian school children have a internet facility, or 25% of college-going students have internet facility, and even among the not only the working class or the poor people, but even in the lower middle class, when you have one smartphone, it goes to the boy. So women are the major sufferers. More girls are dropping out of schools and colleges due to digital divide. And now the last very important aspect is of a violence against women, but that we have experienced violence against migrant women, as also while traveling, and even in the urban homes, for quote unquote breaking the rule of lockdown, they have suffered. And it is in this context that what we need to do now, that is very important, as all the speakers before me have hammered, that we need better data, We need better researches. We need a nuanced understanding of the nature of the migration in different geographical location for different communities. So communication, dialogue, technology, relief and resources, and grounded policies, evidence-based policies are need of an hour. And the relief package that has come, whether it is Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, to the migrant women, only one thing touches, that is one is MG Narega, where 1 lakh crore is allocated. But here also, as I said, there is the new entitlements of the man have emerged after reverse migration, because 30% of the migrant workers who have gone back to their native place, they are still there, and they are standing in the queue for the MG Narega. So women are getting backseat. And even when they get employment, they are given unequal wages. Official rate of 370, but actual wage is, I think Dr. Rukmini Rao will tell you, because she's a founder of Makam, Mahila Kistar Majdoor Sangatna, but the actual wages are 230 rupees, and the women get only 120. Another thing is about the new scheme for the women, for the vendors. In that also, where the 10,000 rupees are given to the vendors to start their business, which they lost during lockdown. I think there also, how many women are beneficiary? Currently, there are so many multicentric studies are done. IMPRI did a study of 18 states of India, where they involved the students, student volunteers, to do the rapid assessment study, and the kind of assessment that has come for the rural India is that most of the benefits of the schemes, even the free distribution of sanitary pad, which is there, people just don't know about it. Another thing that is about Garib Kalyan Yojana, those who have migrated back to their villages in the 8 states and 116 districts, for them government has come up with the 25 schemes, and 15 ministries are supposed to supposed to cooperate with each other for implementation of scheme. And most of this scheme also touch the women's work of cooking, cleaning, carrying, and also collection of fuel, fodder, water, animal care, horticulture, and poultry industry. Handloom is the second is a very major employer of women in India. So I think we have to make a proactive and conscious effort to see to it that the benefits of these schemes, they reach women migrant workers. And the women's movement and the women's rights organizations are concerned about that we must restart the ICDS program. Then there should be Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana. In that also women should be the beneficiary. The Jodi system, where the man is only considered as a worker and women is invisibilized, that has to go. And women, the street vendor scheme, Atmanirbhar Nidhi, should also reach women. And also we need to strengthen the demand side. The fiscal expansion must take place. We must keep cash in the hand of people. Demand side has to be strengthened. People don't have anything. Migrant women are completely resourceless. All the studies have shown, and that's why what we need is a massive intervention of the state for giving social security, the cash transfer, and also the 4 labor codes which have replaced 48 labor legislations, central legislation and 200 state legislations. I think they are not considering women except for maternity benefits. Nowhere women have been even mentioned. The whole discourse is around he, him, and his. So I think the gender sensitivity and gender inclusiveness and gender responsive budgeting has to be there under the health emergency. India accepted the principle of gender responsive budgeting way back in 2004, but still in 2020, we have a miles to go. And the last I would like to conclude by saying that human rights organizations, human rights protocols of UNHRC, ILO, and the UN have to be implemented in this whole, because the repression and brutality against migrant people, I think that is not, under no circumstances is acceptable, and we should adhere to the human rights norm. For the first time, in this month, National Commission for Human Rights has appointed a 21-member committee to see the ground reality of violation of human rights and how to stop this menace. These are some of the references I have based on all the studies have been done during the lockdown period, and they are all available online. This is the poster of, I would like to say, this is hope generating poster, a young boy from Kerala who was told that women don't do any work. And he came up, he was seeing all these women doing every type of different types of activities. And he came up with this painting, which is now a gender budget book. The gender and child budget books cover design, cover of the government of Kerala. So I think this generates hope, and I think we need to acknowledge the valuable contribution that women are making in the Indian economy. And now we will now move to the presentation by the participants. Will you be introducing them, or should I? Hello? Yeah.
Ma'am, you can. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay.
You can. Yes.
So our first presenter, it gets 10 minutes, and Dr. C. Kubendran. Yeah. Hello. Yes, Dr. C. Kubendran, you can make your presentation.
Ma'am, can you start with Danila, ma'am? Danila, yes.
Danila, ma'am. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, Dr. Danila Dora from UK. Yeah. Can she make presentation? Welcome to. Yeah.
Yes,
thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I will speak today about labor as masquerade, gender identity and performance in Melinda Abon's novel Tauben fliegen auf in German, which translates to flyaway pigeon from 2010. Can everyone hear me? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, because it showed on my computer that the connection isn't strong. Yeah, I would like to establish in my paper a connection between the theoretical concept of Joanne Riviere's masquerade of femininity and the gender performance as Judith Butler formulated it, of female migrant workers in the context of a German-speaking contemporary piece of literature. So I think I start a bit with theoretical considerations about the concept of masquerade, and then I move on to the piece of literature. Femininity or womanliness, as Riviere called it in her 1929 seminal work, Womanliness as Masquerade, can be understood as a mask that women wear in order to conceal any kind of masculine traits and to avoid any consequences following disclosure of this very masculinity. Riviere puts this into metaphorical words and draws a comparison between a woman and a thief. And she says, a thief who will turn out his pockets and asks to be searched to prove that he has not the stolen goods in his pocket. In her work, Riviere foregrounds a particular type of woman that she refers to as intellectual. Due to their careers, these women that Riviere describes have managed to become a vital part of public life and space. Unlike other women, though, these intellectual and professionally successful women show much more feminine characteristic traits than masculine ones. So they rather appear to perform their femininity and all duties that are associated with what it means to be a woman. They carry out their roles as wives to their husbands and mothers to their children. They are responsible for running the household with all its chores, while additionally also leading an intact professional as well as social life. In her work as a psychoanalyst, Riviere made many an acquaintance with this type of woman, and she noted down that femininity for them appears to be not to be natural, but a kind of disguise, a defense mechanism, so to say. And with help of this mask, the mask of femininity, they manage to conceal their masculinity and they avert their anxiety of experiencing damaging consequences for their professions and successes in case their masculinity was ever disclosed. Riviere presents us with an image of a modern woman who lives in a patriarchal society in which ethics and values have started to slowly change, as it was in the 1970s.